exposures in the electric vehicles value chain itself. So, for example, we look into battery technology and also lithium-ion batteries. It looks like it's quite an interesting space right now. Hi everyone, and welcome back to The Curious Investor, Saxo's video series where we dive into topics which are driving the investment markets. I'm Fiona, it's July 2023, and I'm with Charu, our Market Strategist, where today we'll be discussing about the exciting topic of electric vehicles. Hi Charu, welcome back to the show.
Thank you, Fiona. Yes, a very exciting topic indeed, and I'm sure it's going to be an interesting chat.
Yes, I mean, it's been so exciting to see how the global electric vehicles market is projected to grow from 287 billion in 2021 to actually 1.3 trillion in 2028. That's a whopping growth. So it's really an investment opportunity that I think most investors will not want to miss.
Exactly.
Yeah, so do stay tuned to the end of this video if you'd like to hear about what are the possible ways that you can gain exposure to this exciting market.
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right, Fiona. It's such an interesting space right now because EV adoption is really skyrocketing. And, you know, there are various factors that are coming into play together. There's obviously a lot of government support. I mean, you look at the US, there's the Inflation Reduction Act. There's a lot of incentives from the government to kind of enable that push towards electric vehicles. Then we also have, you know, prices of EVs getting a lot more affordable. I mean, in the US, again, you can get an electric vehicle now for less than $50,000. So, of course, that's an incentive for the consumers as well to start considering the switch that they want to make from, you know, fuel vehicles to electric vehicles now. And there's a huge push towards enabling a more robust infrastructure as well. So, for instance, the US authorities are actually looking at expanding the charging networks to have about 500,000 charging points available across the country by 2030. So, you know, when you have a charging network or a charging station available closer to your homes, that again, it's a huge factor that is considered by the consumers in whether they want to really switch from you know, their traditional vehicles to an electric vehicle.
Okay, so I think for many investors, when they think about EVs, they immediately think of Tesla. However, the truth is that there's many other players in this space as well. And in fact, traditional car makers such as Ford and General Motors who are pushing into this space. So I'm curious, what are your thoughts on this? Do you think that investors should continue to focus on Tesla or to look into other areas in this space?
Yeah, I mean, you know, Tesla has been synonymous with EV investing for many years, right? But I do think that there is a lot of simplicity around the manufacturing of an electric vehicle. And there are a lot of other parts of the value chain which can potentially offer a better risk reward as well. Tesla, particularly, it still has some things that are playing out well. They're trying to diversify their revenue streams by adding cyber trucks now. They are becoming the standard for charging stations in the US, in North America more broadly as well. So that can also bring an additional benefit to their, you know, top line for the years to come. But I think the headwinds for Tesla are relatively pronounced, and they do not justify then the kind of valuations it's trading at. I mean, if you look at Tesla's margins, they're getting a hit quite a bit because of the price cuts that Tesla has announced over the last several months now. You know, they're trying to capture a bigger share of the market. So their price cuts have been, you know, starting to have an impact on margins. And what that means is that their free cash flow is also declining, which leaves them little flexibility to continue to innovate and invest in that field, which is the precursor, you know, in this environment. You know, you have to be the leader in innovation to be, you know, continue to come up with new technologies and new models in this space. Their self-driving model is also not completely successful right now. So they're facing headwinds there as well. And then the China market has been very tough for Tesla as well, given that China has such a large presence in the EV space. It's difficult to get into China continues to be a big headwind. for Tesla as well, because China traditionally has been one of their strongest markets as well. So I do think, like I said, there are a lot of other parts of the value chain that investors can really consider to ride this EV boom.
Yeah, that's a great point, Charu. And I think for investors who don't want to just invest into the main car makers, but they want a more diversified exposure into different electric vehicles, car makers in the space, they can consider ETFs such as DRIV, which is the Global X Autonomous Electric Vehicles ETF.
Yeah.
But I think even further from that, there are also alternative exposures that investors can look into in the electric vehicle value chain.
Yeah.
So thinking about battery technology or even lithium-ion batteries, what do you think is the prospects for those?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So electric vehicles run completely on batteries, and the pace at which EV adoption is increasing, that is certainly a signal that the demand for these batteries will continue to outpace the kind of supply that we have or are we expected to have. So I think it's a very good way. I mean, if you want to really ride this EV boom, I think playing it upstream is really an interesting space to be in. There are a lot of battery manufacturers and battery material suppliers that could be interesting for this space, like China's BYD or even Cattle. Cattle actually supplies 51% of the global batteries and is also actually trying to innovate into other battery components, such as sodium-ion batteries, for example, which is, I think, going to be the next step after lithium-ion that is currently the most popular. And I mean, if you want to go further upstream, there are these lithium miners that can be considered as well. So something like Pilbara Minerals, which is an Australian company, China's Ganfeng, or certainly Albemarle. These are some very interesting companies that are into lithium mining. And again, if investors want a more diversified exposure, then certainly there are ETFs in this space as well, something like the Global X Lithium and Battery Tech ETF as well.
Another approach is especially for traders, is to invest directly into the commodities futures. Those materials such as lithium, nickel, cobalt, and manganese that go directly into the electric vehicle batteries. And for investors, they can probably look into ETFs that give them exposure to these futures as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes, but going back into the previous point that you had about expanding charging networks across the world, we can see that governments and authorities, they are trying to step up in this space. So maybe you can share a bit more about what has been happening there.
Yeah, I mean, it certainly seems likely that there's a long way to go on that. I mean, as long as the charging stations are not available to consumers, comfortably, it will be very hard for some of the countries to make that switch. So certainly, I mean, it does feel like charging networks could be one of the winning trades as well for riding this EV boom. And there's a lot of standardization in that space, and there's lack of incentives really for a parallel infrastructure as well, which means that there will be a few players kind of controlling that market as well. So for example, in Europe, we have Zaptec, and in US, as we mentioned earlier, Tesla is certainly becoming the charging standard as well. It's possible that that part of the business of Tesla could be separated as well in the future. And again, I mean, there are again ETFs that clients can consider to really get access to the charging network space, particularly as well. Something like ELEC. It's an ETF that invests particularly in companies that provide charging stations.
And the discussion about EVs is definitely not complete without mentioning China, given how much they have been pushing out their own electric car vehicles and is growing really rapidly. So what is your thoughts about that?
I mean, China has certainly been the first mover in this space, right? I mean, the kind of push that they have given to this industry ever since the beginning of the launch of the EVs, it's been massive. Both China and Europe actually, but certainly China has led the way. And I mean, you rightly said, for all of the global car makers, but Tesla particularly, China has been a key market. But recently, there's been a push in China to kind of expand their local manufacturers, something like, Li Auto, Xpeng, BYD we talked about earlier as well, NIO. These are some of the Chinese players in the space. And, there's obviously a clear intent that China wants to push and make sure that the control of the vehicle market is now in the hands of these local players. And that's why I think it's getting increasingly difficult for some of the global EV companies to, again, make a mark in the China market. And what's happening actually on the reverse is that the local Chinese companies, these EV companies, are actually expanding a lot globally as well now. So if you look at, they're trying to penetrate into Europe, into Thailand, and the other Southeast Asian markets as well. So certainly, I mean, we've talked about China a lot of times, and it's still a great tactical play, and it's a great selective play as well. And the EV industry in China particularly remains very interesting if you want to kind of get exposure to some select sectors in Chinese markets.
Good point, Charu. And for investors and traders who are watching out there, of course, there are opportunities in this space, but also risks that we should recognize. So, for example, recessionary concerns. Is this going to affect consumers' demand? Are they going to pull back from buying more electric vehicles? And also the strong energy demand that this entails. Are we able to meet these demands? Yes, so if you're interested to invest into electric vehicles, do explore the instruments that we have in the Saxo platform. For example, we do have a lithium and electric vehicles basket in the platform that you can explore. And our Saxo Strats have also prepared global market quick take, and Charu has also written articles about the macro environment that you can refer to. So if you enjoyed this video, please give us a like and subscribe, and we really look forward to seeing you in the next episode. See you!